In this video, I'm gonna talk about the array modifier and then create a spiral stair with array modifier. So for a start, I'm going to click on my object, go to the modifier, add modifier, generate, and the first option is array. And the moment I click on my array, you can see that the shape of the cube is gonna change, but it's actually not the shape. It's two objects that is stick together, and if I increase the distance between them, we can see that it's actually two cube. So for the option, the first option is fit type, and I'm gonna talking about it later, but the count is the number of object that is repeated. So if I increase the number of count, you can see that now we have 5 cube. The relative offset is the way that Blender calculate the distance between these repeating objects. And if I go to the z-axis and explain to you how it's going to calculate, the size of this cube is 2 meter. Okay, the size of my object. And if, for example, I put 1.5 here, 2 multiply 1.5 is gonna be 3, and the distance between this object origin and the next object origin is exactly 3 meter. Okay, so this is how relative offset works. It's based on the size of your object and then calculate the number by multiplying the size to this number in x, y, and z axis. And let me delete this one. The constant offset doesn't care what the size of your object is. The exact number that you put here is gonna be the distance between the two consecutive objects' origin. For example, if I put 3 here, it's gonna be exactly the same as this relative offset. Although the number are different, the result is the same. Okay, so if I put, for example, 1, it's gonna be one difference between this object origin and this object origin. It's 1 meter. And one of the techniques that you can use is that, for example, you want to repeat your object in x-axis. You can put the relative offset to 1. It's gonna distance your object exactly at the size of the object. And then if you put any number here, for example, you put 0.5, this distance is gonna be the number that you put here. So not only you can use them separately, you can use them together to specify a distance, for example, like this. This is relative offset and the constant offset. And I'm going to explain object offset while creating the spiral stair, but for now the fixed count, this fit type fixed count is exactly the number of repeating objects. But if I change it to fit length and, for example, put the number 5 here, it's gonna see how many object origin Blender can put in 5 meter. For example, from the first object origin to here, we have exactly 5 meter, and it can put 3 cube in 5 meters, so it's gonna be 3 cube. But the moment I put, for example, 4.9, it cannot put object origin in 4.9, that is here. It can put object origin is in here, so it's gonna be 2 cube. Okay, and the curve type is about using curve, and since I don't explain the curve yet, we're not gonna talking about it for now. So let me delete this object for now and add my reference image. Go to the -y, Shift A, image, reference, and where my image is, this is my a stir and press GZ to moving it up and scale it a little. GZ scale. And then GY to moving back. As you can see, we have a cylinder, virtual cylinder here, that is the empty space between this stir. So first I'm going to, for now, add mesh cylinder to increase the depth of them and increase the z-axis. Now let me delete this part and move my image to the left. So now for a start, we need to create this one stir and then repeat our stir. So the stir is gonna be cube, so the primary object, Shift A, mesh, cube, and then go to the edit mode by pressing tab, scale the object in x-axis by using SX, scale the object in z-axis by using SZ. I'm not gonna use the move because you already know all the tools and shortcuts. So moving the stairs to the Y by GY, and then increase the length in y-axis by using SY-axis. And I also think that the height of my stair is a little too much, so SZ to increase the height, and then GY to making it to the ground. Okay, for now this much is enough, and now I'm going to modifier, add modifier, generate, and array. And then I want to move it around in this direction, so the relative offset is gonna be minus y for now. And then in the z-axis, I'm going to increase the z-axis and decrease the factor x to, for example, something like this. And if I increase the count, you can see that it's gonna be repeated in this direction. But what do we do to make it rotate? And unfortunately, in the Blender, we don't have any value for rotation in Array Modifier, but we can copy the value rotation of an empty object to use for Array Modifier. And what is empty object? Empty object is something like 3D cursor that only have value and it doesn't use for anything else. So for creating an empty object, you can press Shift A or go to the add again, empty, and for now I'm going to add a plane axis and change this, the name of this empty axis to, for example, to array. Okay, and now if I select my object, go to the modifier and activate the object offset, you can see that we need to put an object here. So if I click on here, we have our array object. But if you have many objects in your scene, it's better to use this eyedropper and then select this empty object. And it's gonna be add to the object offset, but nothing is gonna be affected because my empty object doesn't have any value. All the value for now is 0. But the moment you change any of this value, for example, you change the location, you can see that my stairs is gonna be changed, and it's exactly like the offsets that we use in Array Modifier. So I can use we want to rotate the stairs in z-axis, so I'm going to, let me draw. You can see that it's gonna rotate in the z-axis. This is the z-axis and I'm going to rotate it in here. So I'm going to increase the z-axis or decrease it to making it rotate. And I think this much is enough. And also let me decrease the value for factor x to making it right like this, and this one is also better to be 1, and the rotation is a little too much, so let me click on plane axis again and put this to -10. Okay, so now I can press my array, increase this number, and then let me look from the z-axis, and you can see that right now it's exactly what I want, but the center of this stair is not at the center of the cylinder. So if we want to make it exactly at the center, it's better to activate the relative offset, because these two offset is gonna conflict with each other. So I'm going to deactivate the relative offset, and then I need to close this stair to the cylinder. So because this is my virtual cylinder, but before that let me scale it a little more with S, and then if I press on the stair and press G and Y, you can see that it's not gonna work in the way that I want. And the reason is that when I press GY, it's gonna move the object origin also. So if I don't want to move my object origin, it's better to go to the edit mode with pressing tab, press L to select my stair, and then press GY, and you can see that it's going to work exactly the way that I want. Okay, so this is good, but now you lost the Z distance, so this time I'm going to use the constant offset and increase the Z distance. And you can also use the empty axis. For example, let me deactivate this and go to the object mode, press on array, and I can also increase it by this. So we can either play with the array, or actually empty object, or play with constant. But the relative offset most of the time are gonna conflict with object origin. And now as you can see, this is exactly the stair that I want, and I also can increase the number of stair. And let me move my image here